You found the next chapter of The Iron Rebel, a military sci-fi saga of war, exile, and political deception. If that sounds like your kind of story, hit subscribe and give this video a like. It helps the story reach new rebels like you. The Confederation in crisis. The Grand Council Hall buzzed with tension, the weight of the Confederation's unraveling pressing down on its members like an invisible force. Senators debated fiercely, their voices echoing through the chamber as factions clashed over the Confederation's direction. In the heart of this chaos, Tullis, Grev, and Volara Kane stood as lone voices of reason, their warnings cutting through the noise yet failing to gain traction. Grev, ever the pragmatist, rose from his seat with measured composure. His calm demeanor belied the urgency in his tone. "Colleagues," he began, his voice steady but firm, "we stand on the precipice of disaster. The outer rings are in open protest, the border systems are fraying, and our citizens are losing faith in this council. If we do not act now, if we do not address their grievances, we risk rebellion. And rebellion, I assure you, will be far bloodier than any war we have faced." His words were met with a ripple of murmurs, some senators nodding in agreement, while others exchanged skeptical glances. Ardin Vale, seated with an air of calculated confidence, leaned forward, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "Senator Grev, your dramatics are, as always, entertaining. But the Confederation is stronger than you give it credit for. A few rabble-rousers in the outer rings do not constitute a rebellion." Grev fixed Vale with a sharp glare, his voice hardening. "Rabble-rousers? These are citizens of the Confederation, Vale. People who have sacrificed and suffered through war, only to find themselves abandoned in its aftermath. They are not asking for luxury, they are asking for dignity. And if you continue to dismiss them, you will reap the consequences." Before Vale could respond, Volara Kane rose, her presence commanding attention as the chamber quieted. Dressed in a deep emerald gown that seemed to glow under the chamber's lights, she exuded both poise and power. Her voice carried an edge of restrained fury as she addressed the council. "Senator Grev is correct," Volara said, her words measured but biting. "The Confederation is at a breaking point. You call it fear-mongering, I call it reality. Our people are not blind to the policies this council has enacted, the rationing, the increased taxation, the erosion of their freedoms under the guise of security. They see it all, and they will not endure it indefinitely." Vale's smirk faded, his expression tightening as Volara's words struck a chord. Ceres Tal, seated beside him, interjected with her usual fiery disdain. "Lady Kane, your sudden concern for the Confederation is touching but transparent. We all know your true motivation, restoring your son's reputation. This is not about the people, it is about your ambition." Volara's eyes narrowed, her voice sharpening like a blade. "Ambition is not a crime, Senator Tal. Nor is it exclusive to me. What I speak of is survival, the survival of this Confederation. But if you are too blinded by arrogance to see the storm gathering on the horizon, then perhaps you are unfit to sit on this council." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices, senators shouting over one another as factions rallied behind their champions. Vale and Tal exchanged a brief glance, their unspoken alliance holding firm even as the council splintered. Grev raised his hands, calling for order, but the chaos was already spiraling. "Enough!" Grev's voice boomed, silencing the room momentarily. He turned his gaze to Vale and Tal, his tone heavy with frustration. "If you will not act to prevent rebellion, then at least have the decency to admit your role in causing it. Your policies have driven the people to desperation. If this council refuses to adapt, we will lose everything." Vale's expression hardened, his voice cutting through the silence like a whip. "Adaptation is weakness, Senator Grev. The Confederation needs strength, not concessions. The people must be reminded of their place, not emboldened by pandering to their grievances." The murmurs grew louder, and the council's divide deepened. Grev shook his head, a rare flicker of despair crossing his usually composed features. Volara, however, did not falter. She stepped forward, her voice rising above the din. "You speak of strength, Senator Vale, but what you call strength is cowardice. True strength lies in listening, in adapting, in building something greater than yourself. This council was founded to represent the people, not to rule over them like tyrants. Remember that, or the people will remind you. As the debate raged on, the seeds of rebellion continued to take root. Protests in the outer rings grew larger, their cries for justice echoing across the fractured Confederation. Border systems, neglected and overburdened, began to openly defy the central government's edicts. Governors and moderates within the council voiced their unease, but their concerns were drowned out by the inflexible authority of Vale and Tal. In their arrogance, the Confederation's leaders mistook silence for compliance, underestimating the resilience of the people they oppressed. The divide between the council and the populace widened with every passing day, and the storm Volara had warned of loomed ever closer on the horizon. In the dimly lit confines of Vale's private office, the two architects of the Confederation's authoritarian turn sat across from each other. The room was adorned with symbols of power, ornate furnishings, a star map etched into the wall, and a desk laden with reports and projections. Ardin Vale poured himself a glass of aged brandy, his movements deliberate, his expression unreadable. Tal leaned back in her chair, her fiery demeanor momentarily subdued as she watched him. "Well," Tal said finally, her voice tinged with exasperation. "That was predictable." Vale swirled the amber liquid in his glass, his sharp eyes narrowing as he considered her words. "Predictable, yes. And necessary. Volara, Kane and Tullis Grev have been thorns in our side for too long. Let them shout themselves hoarse. It changes nothing." Tal arched an eyebrow, her tone sharpening. "It changes everything if the outer rings explode into rebellion." "You heard, Grev. The people are one spark away from open defiance." Vale's smirk returned, cold and calculating. "And that spark will burn itself out. The Confederation is too vast, too entrenched to fall to a few disgruntled systems. The people always grumble when they are reminded of their place, but they will comply." "They always do." Tal leaned forward, her auburn hair catching the dim light as her eyes narrowed. "Don't underestimate the power of desperation, Vale. People with nothing to lose are dangerous. We should be tightening the noose, not tossing oil on the fire." Vale took a slow sip of his drink, savoring the taste before replying. "The noose is already tightening, Ceres." "The new security measures ensure that. Increased patrols, ration controls, targeted propaganda, all of it is designed to maintain order." Tal shook her head, her frustration mounting. "Order? You're clinging to a fantasy of control while the Confederation cracks beneath our feet. We need to adjust, to offer concessions where it matters, or we'll be fighting wars on multiple fronts." Vale set his glass down with a soft clink, his tone turning icy. "Concessions are a slippery slope. Show weakness and they will tear us apart. The Confederation does not need appeasement, it needs discipline. And that discipline starts here, in this chamber." The tension between them thickened, a silent battle of wills playing out across the desk. Finally, Tal exhaled, her voice softer but no less determined. "Just remember, Vale, discipline means nothing if there's no one left to govern." In a secluded parlor within Volara Kane's estate, the mood was equally charged, though the tone was one of urgency rather than dominance. The room, bathed in the warm glow of a holographic fire, offered a stark contrast to the icy atmosphere of the council chamber. Volara paced the room, her movements sharp and restless, while Grev sat in an armchair, his hands steepled as he listened. "They won't listen, Tullis," Volara said, her voice brittle with frustration. "Vale and Tal are too entrenched in their delusions of control. They think brute force can hold the Confederation together." Grev nodded slowly, his expression grave. "It's worse than that. They're not just blind, they're deaf. They dismiss every warning as a weakness and every protest as an inconvenience. They're driving this Confederation toward collapse and they don't even realize it." Volara stopped pacing, turning to face him. "Then we have to make them realize it. There must be a way to shift the Council's balance, to rally enough moderates to counter their influence." Grev leaned forward, his voice low and measured. "The moderates are too fragmented, too afraid of losing their positions to challenge Vale and Tal openly. We need more than words. We need leverage. Volara's gaze hardened, her mind racing. Leverage. Something they can't ignore.
But what?
Grev hesitated, his next words heavy with implication.
The people. If the protests grow large enough, if the governors start pulling support, even Vale and Tal will have to take notice.
Volara's eyes narrowed, her tone sharpening.
You're suggesting we let the protests escalate? That we let the Confederation fracture further just to prove a point?
I'm suggesting, Grev said carefully, that the people's voices might be the only thing louder than Vale's arrogance. If we channel that unrest strategically, it could force the Council to act, or at least expose Vale and Tal for what they truly are. Volara's jaw tightened as she considered his words. It's a dangerous gamble, Tullis. One misstep and we lose everything. Grev met her gaze, his expression unyielding. We're already losing everything. The question is, how far are you willing to go to stop it? For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy with the weight of their shared burden. Finally, Volara turned away, her voice soft but resolute. Farther than they'll ever expect. A group of planetary governors convened in secret in a sparsely furnished room on the outskirts of Volara Prime's central district. The air was thick with tension as they spoke in hushed tones, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of a holographic display showing scenes of protests from the outer rings. This can't go on, said Governor Lys Malric, a wiry man with a sharp, anxious demeanor. The people are at their breaking point. If we don't intervene, the Confederation will tear itself apart. Governor Jala Wynn, a composed woman with a commanding presence, leaned forward. Intervene how, Malric? The Council has made it clear that dissent will be met with force. If we challenge them, we risk being labeled traitors. And if we don't challenge them, Malric countered, his voice rising. We risk rebellion, Jala, open rebellion. Governor Rennick Davos, a burly man with a grizzled beard, crossed his arms, his tone gruff. Rebellion might not be the worst thing. At least it would shake those bastards in the Council out of their ivory tower. Jala's eyes narrowed. And how many lives would it cost, Rennick? How many systems would burn before it's over? The room fell silent, the weight of her question hanging heavily. Finally, Malric spoke again, his voice softer but no less urgent. We need to act. If the Council won't listen, we must find another way. The Confederation is more than just those fools in the chamber. Jala nodded slowly, her expression hardening. Agreed. But we must tread carefully. If we move too soon, we'll give Vale and Tal exactly what they need to tighten their grip. And if we move too late? Malric asked, his tone cutting. Jala's gaze was steady. Then we'll have no one to blame but ourselves. As the governors continued their quiet deliberations, the fractures within the Confederation grew deeper, each conversation a testament to the perilous state of a government teetering on the edge of collapse. This chapter of the Iron Rebel comes to a close. But the war is far from over. If the story spoke to you, leave a like. It fuels the rebellion. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. New episodes drop every week. Until next time, stay sharp, stay defiant.